3rd. This is not normally a meeting night for us, but we're trying to wrap up the budget discussions so that we can complete the Finance Committee report and get the warrant mailed out to the town. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone, in accordance with the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over Lunenburg Public Access. The rebroadcast schedule for Finance Committee is Channel 8 on Saturdays and Sundays at 7 p.m., Tuesdays at 11 a.m., and Wednesdays at 8 a.m. And in addition to that, you can also visit YouTube. Just go to YouTube/Lunenburg Access to see all of the town rebroadcasts. So, do we have any opening comments from the public? Seeing none. Do we have any communications from the committee?
Nope. None. Nope.
I have just one I'd like to share. I'll just pass this around to members of the committee. I have the President's letter from the Association of Town Finance Committees and some useful information in it. So if you want to just take a look at that. Okay, our first order of business is to hear from the town manager. We have some budget updates, and hopefully we can finalize the Finance Committee recommendation on the budget.
I did hand out a, I guess a scorecard on where you are with your recommendations. And I think maybe it would be easiest to take up some items in that order.
Okay?
So Article 8 is prior year bills. There are no prior year bills, and there won't be any prior year bills. So if you, that is something that you could make your recommendation on this evening.
Seeing as there are no prior year bills, I'll accept a motion to recommend approval on Article 8.
Well,
Or actually,
approval, it's recommend,
no action needed, I guess.
or do we recommend passing over? Will it be passed over?
It will be passed over, yep.
So we don't need to take any action then?
I think not.
Okay.
Okay, so then Article 9 is the fiscal 2014 budget adjustment article. I did want to go through with you the spreadsheet that I handed out that shows where I think we're going to end up, but I would ask that you hold your recommendation for town meeting, because a month is a long time for things to happen, and you don't typically make a recommendation to go in the warrant anyway. But there is a one-page spreadsheet. I think I wrote Article 9 on it. And I can go through what we are expecting, how we expect to end the year. So we're looking at not using the Finance Committee Reserve Fund, which is line 16, so that full 50,000 would be available to cover projected deficits. I'm sorry, that's line 13. Then 13A is the salary reserve account. We have $25,000 budgeted. We have had some contract settlements, particularly the police settlement. And we will need to pull some funds from that reserve fund, but we do expect to have about a $6,500 balance at the end of the year. So at your next meeting, or likely your next meeting, we'll have the reserve fund transfer request for that for contract settlements. Line 30, legal expense, I do expect that we will have an overage of about $10,000. We still have a couple of pretty large cases out of planning that are going, and we did have 2 police arbitration matters that we had legal assistance in fiscal 2014. In police lockup, I do expect an overage of about $8,000. This is something that we've typically have overages in, and if the budget were easier to manage at the onset, we'd just put more money in police lockup, but we just don't have that flexibility. So I do expect an overage of about $8,000, which is, typically we've been 20,000+ over, so we are doing a little better by having the reserve officer at the desk and able to do some of the lockup monitoring, but obviously not all of it. They can only do lockup monitoring during the hours that they're there, which is, we have 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Line 43 is the police fire injury leave account. We will have an overage of $13,407. This is as a result of an officer that was on long-term disability that has transitioned to disability retirement in the current fiscal year. In the fire department, I did speak with the fire chief yesterday and today. He is expecting an overage of about $20,000. I don't have a whole lot of detail, but we'll be talking about that at your upcoming meetings. But this is just, again, both the overtime in both the police and fire department certainly could be funded a little bit higher than they are in the budget. We do typically have overages, and we are expecting one in fiscal 14 as well. So then the big one, snow and ice, line 73. Right now, the deficit is just under $210,000 with the bills that have been processed. We are processing the final bills right now, and so I'm estimating right now $235,000. I think that's high, but I just don't have everything processed right now. Hopefully these are the final bills and we don't have any more activity in that account, but probably even next week I'll have a better idea. I expect that we will have everything processed by next week. Veterans Administration, I do expect a small surplus of $591. So the amounts that are in brackets, to be perfectly clear, are the surpluses, and the ones outside of brackets are overages. Then in veterans benefits, we expect an overage of $40,254, and this is based on the claims that we are paying currently. Historical Commission, we're expecting a surplus of $850. In interest and temporary loans, we're expecting a surplus of $18,000. We just haven't borrowed for the school building project in the amount or frequency that we expected when we put the budget together last year. Workers' compensation, we are expecting a surplus of $6,647, and we shouldn't. That should be fine because that's a premium. Unemployment expense, we expect a surplus of $4,332. We don't have any open claims at this point in time when we haven't laid anybody off, so I don't expect that we would have any need to use any more of that budget. In health insurance, we are projecting a surplus of $80,000. We've talked about that a number of times. That's as a result of the changes to the health insurance plans and the renewal that we had with the retiree plans that went into effect January 1st of this year. Life insurance, a surplus of $7,000. Liability insurance, a surplus of $21,147. And the reason we have such a big surplus in liability insurance really is because we get credits from our insurer for undertaking different activities during the year. Not that we knew what the premium would be when we started the year, but through the different activities that we undertake, we receive credits. And then I've plugged in that supplemental assessment for Monty Tech of $49,244, which I really would like to be able to pay this year, so those funds can be available in fiscal 15 for appropriation. So that is a total projected overage of $180,835, which is pretty good on a $30+ million budget when we're starting with a $200,000+ deficit in snow and ice. We do have two small articles to close out, both related to school. From 2007, we had money appropriated for the Regional School Planning Committee expenses. We have $2,439 to close out. And then School Building Committee expenses from another article related to regionalization, $1,500 to close out. And then I would be looking, well, obviously, I'm under this scenario, $176,896 from free cash. I don't have that amount. That 180. Yep, that's okay. That's right. So I don't quite have that amount. If everything stays as it is, we would be short $17,103. So I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks, certainly by town meeting, some things will change. Our projected snow and ice deficit will come down a little bit, and I can get a better handle on some of these numbers, and that we could break even with, with the supplemental appropriation from free cash. Are there any questions?
Carrie, just to be clear, on line 13A, you said that that's after transfers, and you will be bringing those transfers to us prior to town meeting. Is that correct?
Yes. Probably at your next meeting.
Okay.
And these are not for contracts that are on the annual town meeting warrant. This is the police contract was settled prior.
Any other questions on the budget adjustments? So we won't be taking action on this one this evening, as this is still a bit fluid.
So then Articles 10, 11, 12, and 13, those are collective bargaining agreements, and I don't have anything additional to report. So those you will, if there is a settlement prior to town meeting, those you have to report at town meeting.
Do you anticipate any of those closing?
Well, the two DPW contracts, yes, but there will not be any additional financial impact. So then Article 14 is the fiscal 2015 capital plan. And if you want to look in your budget document, there is a list of the capital items. I'm going to have to just step away and get mine.
No, we didn't do it last time.
I thought we did.
So on page 22, if you're in the budget document, is the capital plan. And then Karen Brochu, our town accountant, handed out a multi-page document. And projected revenues, expenditures, fiscal 2015, based on town manager's revised budget. So we're going to be working from this document as well. So the proposal from the Capital Planning Committee that I've included in my budget is for a total cash outlay in fiscal 15 of $689,152. That includes the fire truck, which we will make a cash payment for in fiscal 2015, and then we're going to finance the additional amount. So when we're talking about the total amount for the capital budget, it's the cash outlay plus the borrowing. That's what has to be appropriated. So if you look on Karen's spreadsheet, on the right-hand side, about halfway down, there is a line that says capital articles. And it says $1,114,152. That is the amount being requested for the capital budget. $689,152 will be paid for in cash, and the balance will come from borrowing. So if you look over on the left-hand side, a few lines down on the left-hand side under other revenues, there is a borrowing. There is a line called borrowing, and it has $425,000.
In FYI, yeah.
So again, the Capital Planning Committee reviewed all 23 items that were submitted for funding for fiscal 2015, and they recommended funding all but the street sweeper, painting at Town Hall, the shade structure at Turkey Hill Middle School, and the speed sign with recording for the police department. So everything but those 4 items is included in the capital plan.
Does that mean the motion would be to approve, to recommend approval of the $1,114,150?
Can't really hear you, and you want to speak into the mic as well.
I guess I'm asking if then the motion would be to recommend approval of the capital plan budgeted at $1,114,152 to include $425,000 in borrowing and $689,152 in cash outlay. That would be,
That sounds pretty good.
Sounds good.
all right, well, I'll make that motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
Discussion.
I think we've pretty much discussed it a lot.
Has the Capital Planning Committee reconvened in any manner since some of the discussions that have taken place?
We have not.
And my own sense of revisiting or visiting or discussing at all the whole issue of the street sweeper, if we do visit it, would not be to discuss it as a capital item, but to discuss potentially funding to be able to outsource for next spring in order to have the numbers that they're looking for in order to determine which way is the better way to go.
Well,
But I wouldn't do that as a capital, so.
bear in mind, next spring would be the fiscal 15 budget.
No, I understand, but I guess what I'm just suggesting is that rather than do a capital outlay in terms of purchasing or contributing towards a purchase, I would look to outsource for 2015, but somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? If we ever get to the point where we're talking about any funds that haven't been appropriated yet.
So we would need an additional appropriation at a later date to cover that,
Right.
Potentially.
potentially, if we were to take that path.
Right, that would be where I would be on it.
Anyone else? My personal opinion with regard to the street sweeper is to leave this in the hands of the Capital Planning Committee. We've charged them with a duty to evaluate all the capital requests that we had. In their judgment, they didn't have enough information to recommend approval on that item. I agree that further information is necessary, and I'm prepared to support the recommendation of the Capital Planning Committee.
I think the only other thing that I would add, with the chairperson being unavailable right now and being out, we really haven't had any meetings in some time, but I'll speak for the group that I think one of the top priorities when we re-adjourn is to really work with the town manager and the DPW director to come up with a solid analysis, one way or the other, of whether outsourcing made sense or not. And then, obviously, if it's determined that outsourcing is not a solution, then this would take a higher priority in next year's capital planning budget.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? I do have one remaining question. Have we determined the term of the borrowing?
For the fire truck?
Yes.
Right now, it's proposed four additional years. So we're going to, 4 years.
So it's
We're going to make a
$550.
cash payment in 15,
Right.
and then 4 years of borrowing.
An additional $425,000, that would be financed over 4 years.
Yes.
And it would be bonded at the end of the year?
Well, we're going to have a lot of opportunity to be borrowing money, so at some point when it,
So if we're making a down payment, will we also be making a
I-
debt service payment?
not in
this-
fiscal 15.
Not in 15.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the gist of my question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else?
The useful, what is the useful life of the asset, the fire truck?
The fire truck,
Yeah, it's
20
20
years is,
Far in excess of the 4 years. Good. Far in excess of the 4 years.
Yes.
of borrowing.
Yeah.
And importantly, in excess of the 10 years, that's part of the new guideline
Oh, yeah.
that we're looking to establish.
And we're really doing that short term because we know we have additional trucks to purchase, and we're trying to get into a cycle where we're just paying for one truck at a time.
Great.
I think that's the appropriate approach, to stagger the purchase of the equipment and thereby stagger the debt service, which actually smooths it out for all of us.
Okay, anything else? We have a motion on the table to recommend approval of the capital articles in the amount of $1,114,152, of which $425,000 would be funded from borrowing and $689,152 from available funds. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? 6 votes in favor, no one opposed.
Okay, so the next article for you to take up is Article 18, the fiscal 2015 operating budget. So I wanted to, before we started, wanted to make one comment about the information that was presented last week. I presented that 4-page document. There was a big pie chart on projected expenditures, and there's something that is not necessarily clear, and I just wanted to point that out to you. In that pie chart, it shows that education spending is 49% of the total budget. That includes the Monty Tech assessment plus Lunenburg Public Schools, but not the employee benefits portion of the Lunenburg Public Schools budget. The benefits portion is shown in the employee benefits section. So if you were to add in the employee benefits portion of the Lunenburg Public Schools appropriation, that brings that total education spending up to something just under 55%.
And that provides a better historical context for comparing prior years.
Yes, yes, it does. So in the budget, and again, we will work with the town accountant's spreadsheet that she put together. And I wanted to mention, before we go through this, the $116,100 that was on the table, or the, plus the $49,000, if you, that amount that was showing as surplus, right now we've plugged that into the reserve fund. It can be wherever you want, but for the, we've plugged it into the reserve fund based upon some discussion that we had at the selectmen's meeting. So that's how it's presented. If you want it somewhere else, it can go we can take that out and make that adjustment.
So if it sits in the reserve fund, would that be the Finance Committee's discretion, or would that be a town meeting vote?
The reserve fund is Finance Committee discretion. And it could either stay there, or we could take it up at a fall town meeting and it could be reappropriated somewhere else. Or you could make a different recommendation, but that's where we've put it right now. And the one other item that we should go through is I gave you a debt service spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing that we didn't have plugged into the budget was the anticipated debt service for the school construction project. And we were waiting for the cash flow projection from our owner's project manager, which we have received, and the treasurer and I have met with our financial advisor a couple of times to put together a projected debt service schedule for this project. So a couple of things. One thing that it is important for us to do is to maintain our bank qualification on issuing debt as long as we are able to do so. Because as long as we are bank qualified, we issue tax-exempt bonds rather than taxable bonds. And the threshold is $10 million. So in any year that we issue $10 million or less in bonds, they are tax-exempt bonds and we get a better interest rate. If we go over $10 million, we're issuing taxable bonds and we're paying a higher interest rate. So what we tried to accomplish through the schedule that we put together, and this is a draft, it's tentative, based on how we see things, is to maintain our bank qualification in fiscal 15, 16, well, this is 15 and 16, if possible, is what we're looking at doing. We're also looking at using the State House Note Program because it's an less expensive way for us to issue debt. And we are able to do that as long as we're not issuing more than $3 million in debt. So that's what we put this together based on that. So in fiscal 15, based upon the cash flow analysis that we have from the owner's project manager, we're expecting that the interest costs associated with debt in fiscal 15 would be $167,438. We are looking at issuing in fiscal we're looking at doing 3 different issues. Well, one is actually in fiscal 14. So in fiscal 15, we're looking at issuing $3 million and $8,450,000, which actually doesn't make sense. I talked about the $10 million. This is a little bit different than what we were looking at before. So that's what this is based on. So we're looking at increasing our overall debt expense by $167,438, and the fiscal impact, or the impact to the average homeowner, is $36.43. So the difference is the budget document that you have this evening has that $167,000 interest payment included in it. Then if we follow this proposal. In fiscal 16, the impact to the average homeowner would be about $147. And then in fiscal 17, that would jump up to $458, and then top off in 18 at $488. So we're right in the ballpark of what we were presenting all along and at town meeting and through the election. As you know, it's the treasurer and the Board of Selectmen that determine the borrowing, but they've already committed to 30 years. This is based on 30 years, and it will depend on what our cash flow needs are when we're going out to market for the different borrowings. So if you go to, in Karen's spreadsheet, if you go to the second page that starts fiscal 2015 projected omnibus budget, this is the proposed recommendation, the way that we voted at town meeting, with all of the different lines. And on the last page, or the second to last page, the total that we're requesting under Article 18, the operating budget, is $29,079,384. And that's, again, assuming that that amount that was left on the table is appropriated into the reserve fund and not just left unappropriated. And then the final page, Karen put together a spreadsheet that identifies the changes between the budget document you have dated February 15 and what's in front of you this evening. So the changes are under revenue. The $31,000 for the offset receipt was moved from a local receipt to an other revenue category. And then on the expenditure side, that $167,439 we talked about in short-term interest has been added. The $116,000 has been added as an appropriation. And then the $425,000 has been added into the borrowing. That's actually not this article. So that's the previous article, the 425. So the last page is her reconciliation to the first page, and the first page of the document includes the operating budget and the capital budget.
So the total figure that we're talking about for this article then would be the $32,640,062.26?
No, that's total spending,
Okay.
and that includes capital, and it includes all of your non-appropriated costs. The total for this article is on the second to last page, and it's a $29,079,384.
In our last meeting, we reviewed about 5 or 6 different possible usages of that surplus.
Yeah.
Are any of those, for example, the Lane property first year, or the hiring of the land use director, are funds within this budget to accommodate those, or have those not been decisioned yet?
Well, funds to accommodate in so much as that money's in the reserve fund and would
okay.
be appropriated.
All right.
But it hasn't gone into the specific
All right.
lines.
Okay, so then at town meeting, if that article is approved, then so this isn't something that would then have to be appropriated in the fall. This would be appropriated as a result of the town meeting action?
It would be if it's appropriated in in the reserve fund. It could be
Okay.
transferred out. When you include a dollar amount in the warrant, that sets the high limit. You're not necessarily, if you agree to recommend approval on that $29 million, you're not even necessarily, I mean, we're going to put a document in the budget, and you're essentially approving this, but it doesn't mean that you can't change and say you want to move that $2,500 out of the reserve fund into debt service for the Lane property.
If we appropriate it into reserves, we can then do those transfers.
You can do them administratively during the year.
Right.
Yeah, or it can be done at town meeting, just by changing the motion. Or we can do that this evening, too. Yeah.
What's your expectation in terms of this budget between now and town meeting? Are we expecting changes in the budget as structured here?
I don't expect changes.
So you're expecting us to take action this evening? There's no reason why we can't
Yeah, there's
take-
no reason for you not to.
Okay,
great.
Yeah. Now, you may want to have some discussion about those items.
Certainly. So I was just going to comment, I did watch the selectmen's meeting on Tuesday evening and listened in on the discussion that they had, and I think it was Mr. Matthews that suggested we move that surplus into reserve. If it's in just a reserve account, then it becomes the discretion of the Finance Committee to reappropriate that somewhere else. There are other options. It could be appropriated directly to line items at town meeting. It could also be potentially put into a stabilization fund. That would require a 2/3 vote to put it in and another 2/3 vote to take it out. So that could get complicated if we were to take that approach. Are there any of the items that we care to discuss at this time? For example, the Lane property.
I would like to resolve that before just assigning it to the reserve fund. I don't know why, I just feel like I would. Although I suppose it really doesn't matter if it's in the reserve fund and it would just be pulled out because at town meeting they vote to approve it and the sale actually goes through, because that would be the second thing, the grant would have to be going through anyway. Correct.
That article is contingent on approval of the state grant.
Right, so that money wouldn't be spent if the grant was not approved, so
Right.
the reserve fund is probably fine, so I guess I could act now. I'm sorry.
So if we were to make a recommendation tonight, it would be in the warrant that gets published to the community. So they'd know what our recommendations are ahead of time. If we don't do that, then we'll be recommending at town meeting. We'll probably have to caucus based upon the discussions that occur at that time.
So we just talked about the Lane property and the fact that it's contingent on approval of the state grant. So appropriating money this evening could even be viewed as premature. If we look at,
Wouldn't be premature. It would still be contingent upon the grant. Even at town meeting, it'll still be contingent upon the grant, so it's not going to be premature. Nothing will change between now and town meeting on that.
Well, I guess.
Is that fair?
I'm just thinking the appropriation in general could be made after the grant is won.
Well, it's a transfer. If the money's
Right.
appropriated in the reserve fund, then it's just a transfer.
Right.
Simple transfer.
Yeah.
The other item that came up was the additional salary for the land use director, upgrading that position. And if I'm not mistaken, town manager has committed to offset that with savings in the legal
Yes.
account.
Yeah.
Which is another argument for putting that in the reserve fund and not appropriating it specifically to that line.
Based on the discussions we've had, I don't see anything that would hinder us from transferring those funds as needed when we need them. I don't see any real benefit to dredging each item up one after another right now. If that money is in the reserve fund, we then have the time, at the right time, to transfer those funds to get those things done. That's what I would recommend.
So there will be a lengthy discussion at town meeting about how to spend those additional funds if we do indeed decide to spend those additional funds. I'm not sure if the will of town meeting will be to leave a whole bunch of money in the reserve fund for us to decide later on. So I would really want us to make some recommendations, at least to make recommendations on prioritization of this list that we have in front of us. And we don't have to take action on it today, but we can at least make it known that here's where we would prefer to spend the money if we decide to spend the money.
Not to throw a wet blanket on this
Please.
discussion, but I have to. So the reserve fund is restricted by state law for extraordinary expenses.
That's true.
So it would be difficult for you to transfer money out of the reserve fund
Afterward.
administratively.
Yep, that
Which
makes
I-
sense. So there's more of an impetus for us to make some recommendations, at least by town meeting, on how to spend that additional money. And if we want to get our opinion out in front of the voters, we could actually make those recommendations, or some of those recommendations tonight. We don't have to recommend all of it. We could recommend some of it. Just my humble opinion.
So what specific items would you like to talk about, Brian?
I believe that the land use director position is one that is critical. I think it will save the town a lot of money. I think it would make sense for us to put it in there, and it's not going to actually come out of even the reserve fund that we were talking about. It will come out of legal. So I'd recommend that we include the funding for that additional position first, personally. Do you want to talk about all of them, or you want to do one at a
Well,
time?
no, we could take that one first. So I'm just trying to understand mechanically what you would propose to do. Would we reduce the appropriation in legal services by $12,500 and increase the appropriation for that position by the same amount?
That would be my recommendation. Yep.
So you would be reducing the expenditure under line 30 by $12,500
Yep.
and increasing the expenditure under line 35 by the same amount.
Correct.
Net effect zero.
Net effect zero.
I would agree with that recommendation.
It happens to show up under planning board. Would it continue to stay under planning board?
Yes,
Okay,
that was my intention.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So do I have a motion to reduce the appropriation from the legal service by $12,500 and increase the planning board by the same amount?
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion?
Do we have to be that specific if it's within the total general government line?
I would
Do we,
Yes.
defer to town manager on that. I believe we do.
I think so, because the moderator will take it up by groups, but if there are any questions, he'll reference specific lines.
Any further discussion,
Plus, it makes it very clear what our intention is.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? 6 votes in favor, no one opposed. Is there another item on this list you would want to take up?
If we're looking at me,
Anyone? For example...
the $2,500 for the Lane
2,500.
property,
Yeah.
and I believe that would come out of the reserve fund, as it's currently situated.
So,
And that would go into borrowing?
25.
Yep, so you would be looking to reduce line 13 by $2,500 and increasing line 3 by $2,500.
That's, line 3 is interest temporary loans.
Yep.
For those folks who aren't looking at this piece of paper. So moved.
I was just going to ask for a motion. So the motion is to move, to reduce the appropriation in the reserve fund by $2,500 and increase the appropriation in administrative fees loans by the same amount. Do I have a second?
I'm sorry, that was 3A?
3A.
3,
VA or
not
three?
3A.
Oh,
Three.
3, sorry,
Okay.
my
Interest
mistake.
temporary loans.
Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. Discussion?
After having seen the presentation on the Lane property, I think this is a really good investment of our money.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? 6 votes in favor, no one opposed. Anything else on this list we'd like to take up?
Would there be any issues moving forward in transferring reserve fund monies to the pavement management program? Would there be any difficulties in doing that? From a
At a
process
later
standpoint?
date?
At a later date?
You would,
From,
through town meeting action.
did you say from reserve fund?
From a reserve fund? It would require a town meeting
You know,
action?
it really would, because it's not, wouldn't be considered, you wouldn't consider it an extraordinary
Correct.
expense, which is what the state law requires. So, I mean, that would be another safety for anybody at town meeting that was concerned that we're giving the finance committee all of this authority to spend $100,000+. It really can't be expended without town meeting action. To move it out of the reserve fund.
Right.
We have 7 items that you gave us last week were potential places to put some of this money.
Yep.
Are there any others that we don't have in front of us yet?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Not that, okay, that's fine. Then we've just taken action on 2 of them, so we have 5 left.
So here's the concern that I have. We have a surplus this year, basically due to a 0.0% increase in healthcare costs and some other insurances that are coming in a bit less. There's no guarantee that that savings is going to recur, and I'm very concerned about taking what amounts to a one-time revenue source and applying it to a recurring expense.
Yeah.
That argues in favor of the pavement management plan. We've been underfunding that plan since its inception. It's one where we have some discretion in terms of how much we can add or subtract in any given year. We'd like to try and fully fund it if that were ever possible. But the rest of these requests amount to a measure of recurring expense. Whether it's the schools, which is looking to add additional personnel, the police department, which is looking for 3 additional officers, the fire chief recommending 24/7 coverage at the public safety building, and the street sweeper, which we've already talked about. So I'm inclined to agree with you, Steve.
We've discussed this subject 10 times maybe in the last year, and we've almost all universally agreed that where we could find funds to help augment the pavement management plan, that we ought to do it. And to me, this is one of those situations where we have the opportunity to do it, and I would personally like to see it happen.
I agree with the logic that you stated, Mark, on not utilizing these funds for things that will potentially become recurring, as in the hiring of folks. I agree with you that we have drastically underfunded our pavement management plan for many, many, many years, and we've been looking for places to find some money. This is a one-time money that we can plug into the pavement management plan, so I would support that as well.
Do I have a motion to reduce the appropriation in the reserve account by whatever remaining amount there is, I guess, of the 116? So it'd be 113.5, is that right?
13.6, yeah.
Yeah, how much did you put in there?
The exact amounts.
Yeah,
$116,100.
less $2,500 is 113.6.
I'm sorry.
And you've only taken out 500. I mean, 25.
25, yeah.
It's 113.6.
I don't like to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to have to. I still think that we haven't put any money in there for there to be any opportunity to outsource street sweeping if that's something that needs to occur. And I'm not sure it would be a bad idea to put it somewhere, since outsourcing this year won't, or next year won't save any money, because basically now you're paying someone to do something that you typically they were just already employed to do. So I guess if there's a way to fund that, and if we don't spend it on that, great. If they do spend it on that, I'm going to assume it's because it's necessary. But I still think we can bank on for 2015, there will be no problem with the street sweeper. It will work just fine. And then you're still going to have the same problem next year with not enough information to determine whether or not outsourcing is a viable option. That's just my take on it.
Through you, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
to the town manager. The question, if we were to put these funds into pavement management, which is part of the highway department,
Yeah.
would they have the flexibility to then move some of it over to potentially outsourcing on street sweeping?
I would have the legal flexibility to do that.
There you go.
Thank you.
That doesn't necessarily mean I would be comfortable doing that.
I understand.
But I mean, legally, that could be done. Just to comment on street sweeping, we are not intending on outsourcing in fiscal 15.
Right.
I talked to the DPW director as late as this afternoon. We understand we need to put together a plan, and we haven't done what we need to do, but we're not, and we're also not banking on getting through this year and next year without needing to make any repairs to the street sweeper. We already have something that needs to be fixed. It was out and running. It is working because the temperature is such that it can be out and running without the AC unit being fixed, and we can probably do that for a couple of months as long as the temperature stays reasonable. But it will need to be fixed, and we are expecting that it does need to be fixed, but we're also not expecting to be outsourcing.
We, in fact, budgeted for that fix, right?
Well, the No, we haven't included any additional
But there
funds
was
for
a
any fixes.
$6,000 something. Okay, I misread something.
I mean, that's what we talked about, that's what it would be $6,000. We do expect to be paying for that this fiscal year,
Okay. Out of the existing.
out of the existing
operating
appropriation.
budget.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if I read the numbers correctly, we had a reserve fund of $166,097. We took $2,500 out of there, so that would be $163,597. Correct?
I'm sorry, what? Well, you're not moving 163, though.
We had, I'm just going through the numbers to get.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I believe those are the correct numbers, yes.
So, as it sits right now, we're looking at a reserve fund of $163,597. That means we would be looking at a change of $113,597 to get it to $50,000.
Okay, I just want to go back. The figure that we started from, the 116,100, was it 2503 taken from that, or 2,500?
No, you know what, the difference is, on the
Rounding.
town accountant sheet, she's got $116,097. That's the $3 difference.
Okay, thank you,
It's just rounding.
thank you.
So do I have a motion to reduce the appropriation in the reserve fund by the amount of $113,597 and increase, I believe it's line 61, general highway maintenance, by the same amount?
So moved.
Is there a
Second?
Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 6 votes in favor, no one opposed.
And then just as a point of clarification, on as these motions are made, since for the warrant articles, they're all to recommend approval, these are to actually reduce the reserve fund, that's correct? These are actual actions on the budget. So, okay, I just want to make sure I'm stating them correctly.
Brings the reserve fund to $50,000.
Right.
Correct?
Yes. Which is where it started.
And we're-
So then the,
I just wanted to confirm, does that make the new number for general highway maintenance 371,799?
oh boy, I haven't added that one up yet.
Total transparency.
That's why you're on the finance.
That's great.
Oh, if that's why, I'm leaving. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh,
What did you think the number was?
371,799.
That's one, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
So the one other item then is, again, the Monitech supplemental assessment. If we're able to pay that in fiscal 14, that $49,244, then that amount is available in fiscal 15. My recommendation would be that that amount go to Lunenburg Public Schools, but that's something that you probably would like to discuss as well. It is in the same group, so it can be transferred.
You mean it could be transferred later on?
It can be transferred later on.
Or we can amend the budget tonight, our budget recommendation.
You could, but I wouldn't recommend doing that because, I mean, as I showed you, I have a $17,000 gap right now. And, you know, I can't make the commitment that I have that. I hope I will be able to cover that.
Well, we already agreed to table the adjustments to this year's budget, of which
Right.
that 49,000 is one part.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's not that, if we're able to do that, that doesn't change the total budget. It doesn't even change the education group. It will just change the lines, which can be presented at town meeting.
And conceptually, that money was earmarked for education already. So the fact that we move it from one education pocket to a different education pocket makes a lot of sense to me.
Right, and we have an opportunity to make a comment in our Finance Committee report that accompanies the warrant
Oh.
that we would support, if we're able to pay it in fiscal 14, keep that money in the school department budget for fiscal 15. And that is exactly what the draft says.
Wow.
Sorry. So I don't think we need to take any action on that particular item, given that it's tied in with the fiscal 14 adjustments.
Right. I would agree with you.
Okay? Do we have any other proposed budget adjustments? Do I have a motion to approve
Recommend.
or recommend approval for the total omnibus budget in the amount of $29,079,384,
So moved.
As amended this evening.
as amended? Thank you.
As amended, okay.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you.
So if I am so lucky to have the Board of Selectmen vote the same way on the budget on Tuesday night, then I certainly can change my budget recommendation to match that. If they vote something different, I'll have to figure out how to make those notes so it's clear who's recommending what.
Haven't you listed them in parallel in the past when they've been different?
Yeah, that's
We haven't had
that's
that in
what
some
we-
time.
Yeah, that's what we would end up doing. So then, I didn't have a recommendation on Article 19, which is the stabilization fund. I think you were holding that pending the budget discussion this evening. So the-
think you didn't have a final number, did you? Is that what the problem was last
Yeah,
time?
it may have been. So the recommendation for an appropriation into the stabilization fund is $74,729, and that would be coming from free cash.
Is that likely to change between now and town meeting?
No. That would bring us to the 5%, yeah.
Could you read that number to me again? I started writing.
74,729.
I just write slower. Thank you.
You said that would bring it to 5%?
Yes.
Do I have a motion to recommend approval of Article 19 to move $74,729 from free cash into the stabilization fund?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 6 votes in favor, no one opposed.
So then the next I have is Article 22, which is the purchase of the Lane property.
So we've already voted to approve funding for this process. I think it's a pretty easy recommend approval for the article. So
Is that a motion?
I would like to make that motion, please.
I'd like to
second.
second that.
Okay. Any further discussion on the Lane property?
No, I just hope the grant comes through.
I think we all do.
We are-
Those in favor?
Oh.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 6 votes in favor, none opposed.
So then I have Article 24, which is the appropriation from the sale of cemetery lot receipts. And I have a handout for you.
This was the trust fund discussion? Okay.
My pleasure.
So at last week's meeting, you had asked what the Cemetery Commission was hoping to do with that $25,000 appropriation. It's been probably about 8 years or so since they've requested an appropriation, and what they're looking to do is some tree trimming work, tree planting, grading and shaping of a new roadway to a new area, purchasing loam seed for filling in the new section where grass didn't take, clearing, filling, loaming, planting on the backside of South Cemetery, pricing, rebuilding, or building a new receiving tomb for winter storage of caskets, pricing out a niche wall for entombment of cremated remains, and crack filling and possibly sealing some of the roadways within the cemeteries.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm becoming a problem, aren't I? Item 3, it says grade and shape new roadway for new area on which cemetery?
I'd have to ask. I don't know which one.
Okay. I'm sure we have more land on south, but I don't know if there's any more land over on north. But I don't know which roadway it is or which area.
I think, if I recall the discussion, the concern was, how did we establish that $25,000 might be the appropriate amount? With this list of projects, it would seem that that would be reasonable. Did we ask the question of what is the annual income typically in
We did, and I shut my computer down too soon, so Karen went downstairs. She put that information together for me, so she'll be back up with that in a minute.
Okay.
So we can just talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
Or we can skip over that for just a minute. Look, yeah. Do we want to move to Article 26?
We need Karen for 26,
was
so
the
how about
offset.
27?
Oh, we need that,
That was the offset account that we had questions about.
right.
How about, we'll talk about 27. 27 was the establishment, a request for Lunenburg to approve the establishment of a stabilization fund within the Monty Tech budget. And I was in touch with Barbara Reynolds, she's actually the chair of the Monty Tech School Committee and Lunenburg's representative to the school committee. And they do not need us to act on this. 10, the information I have is that 10 of the 18 communities that are part of the Monty Tech region have already voted in favor of the establishment or to authorize the establishment of the stabilization account. So that is more than what they need for approval to establish the account. And you may recall that when they made their budget presentation, they actually talked about putting $25,000 into that stabilization account that they were going to fund out of their excess and deficiency account. So that this warrant article will be withdrawn or passed over.
Okay.
I think I can withdraw it,
Oh,
which would be my preference.
Right.
so that implies that the numbering will change. Okay.
Well, and it probably will change because the chair of the Board of Selectmen hasn't ordered the warrant yet.
which I think was your concern last week.
It was.
I did have that concern, yes.
All right. Okay.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
What is it that you,
We're interested in the annual revenue generated from the sale of cemetery lots.
okay. I don't have the history here. The report that I have is for this current year, and I can tell you that we have generated $7,000 in revenue through the month of March. I mean, it obviously varies depending on what happens in any given year, so, excuse me. $7,000 is what we generated in revenue. There is a balance in that account right now, excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat, of $192,000.
And we haven't tapped that account in several years?
It's been a long time. I mean, I want to say it's probably been about 6 years since they've had an article on to allocate money for cemetery improvements, which is what this fund is used for, so.
And if anyone knows, I don't think we've had an inordinate amount of deaths this year, have we?
I know we have an aging population.
I can get you the history on the revenue. I can get you the history on the revenue if you wanted to see that.
That's right.
To
For
see
some
what it
people, it
looks
was
like.
inordinate, right? Sorry.
So if we were to appropriate $25,000 to this would just be for fiscal 15, right?
No, because what would happen, what we've done in the past is they have the capital article, they're asking for town meeting approval in order to spend, is the article $25,000 that they want? So what we would typically do is transfer the funds out of this account to that capital project fund, and then the funds would roll forward from year to year until they're fully expended.
Oh,
So they have that $25,000 authorization in place. The funds are moved to the capital project fund, and then, like I said, as they expend it, we spend it down, which is what happened in the past. They actually had 2 prior authorizations, each for $25,000, and they're now down to, I think they have $1,900 left, and they're looking to do more, so that's the reason for the article.
maybe I can ask a question of the town manager. This sounds like some of their normal operations as opposed to something that would be capital in nature. And I'm just trying to find out why would we put it in a capital account?
No, I think that's probably not true, because the sale of lots account under the statutes, the only thing that they can use that for is cemetery improvements. They
Yep.
have another trust fund that they have, which is the perpetual care interest account, which is the trust fund that they use for their day-to-day operations. So,
Our definition of capital, though, I'm not sure any of these things individually would qualify as capital. That's why I'm just asking if this maybe should be funded through operations and we should start.
Which account are we talking about?
I'm not sure what Brian means.
Well,
I guess
It's
is the question, is that money moved into a line in the budget?
No, it's not moved into a line in the budget.
oh,
No, it's not moved into a line in the budget. It's part of the capital expenditures for 2015. I mean, it's not part of the capital plan that you see, the $1 million that you just approved, but it is considered a capital expenditure for the cemetery department, for the improvements to the cemetery. And
okay.
the source of the funds is the sale of lots account, which is restricted for those types of expenditures.
So it's basically a $25,000 capital improvement
Right, to the cemetery.
at the discretion of the cemetery to figure out what those improvements are.
Correct.
So that would meet the threshold for capital. I'm assuming it's going to have a useful life, more than a year, and the value was $25,000. It's a bit of a stretch.
It
In the
is,
cemetery.
A bunch of
don't get me wrong, I want to spend the money this way. I want to make sure that the cemeteries are taken care of. That's not the issue. It's just, I'm wondering why this qualifies as capital rather than as something else. Because it's their normal operation. They're going to need to trim trees on a regular basis. They're going to need to do, some of this work on a regular basis, and I don't know why.
I think the intent is
Grading
there.
and loam seeding and all that stuff, it doesn't feel like capital.
Yeah, I
in-
think
in
the intent is to expand. They're doing this work, excuse me, to expand the cemetery.
Okay.
I'm not saying you have to agree with it, but I think that's the intent of
And I think that's
there.
a good thing. I'm not against it. Okay. I can hear everybody saying, "Shut up, Brian," so,
No, it's
No.
clear that some of these are more operating budget type things than they are capital. There are some that qualify traditionally as capital, and then there are others that really appeared like they would be tree trimming. I would think that that would be considered an operating expense, not a capital expense. But it just seems like this is viewed within a different context than our capital plan.
in one way, it eases the funding source. Okay, so from that perspective, maybe that's what we have to do, so.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I'm inclined to vote in favor of this, but if there's enough of an ambiguity here about how this fits, perhaps we should withhold our recommendation until town meeting and see what the what the discussion at town meeting tells us. Nothing, is there anything that's gonna, are we postponing anything by not, I don't reckon we are, by withholding our recommendation.
I'm going to, is it safe to assume that this is how the Cemetery Commission accesses its funds? And this is the only way the Cemetery Commission can access those funds?
Yes.
Okay, then that's,
And if it makes you feel any better, and it probably doesn't, this is how it's handled in every town I've worked in, and I guess I can almost say 25 years now. I mean, the salary of the staff comes from the town's operating budget, and the expenses come out of one of the accounts related to cemetery receipts.
so it's kind of like a revolving fund, except that it's not appropriated the same way.
So it's similar, yeah, it's
Okay.
similar.
And if you read the article, the account is to be used for the care, improvement, and embellishment of the cemetery. And from what Karen said about the statute, that's the only way that we can use those revenues. So if we don't appropriate this amount, those revenues are just going to sit there and be underutilized.
Yeah, no,
That makes no sense to me.
my concern was actually, we're putting it into something called a capital account, and it's really not capital. But I am inclined to vote for it. I just wanted to ask the question and open it up and find out why we were calling this capital expenditure, because in some cases, many cases, these are not capital expenditures by the definition we've used in the past.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the article.
I'll second that.
Okay, great.
Any further discussion? Brian? Those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.
No, it is a good question, I would like to, but I also just wonder if it's a 30B issue or a language too, so, but I'm fine with it.
Well, I'll make a note to look at it again.
It's a good summer month project.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next is Article 26, to authorize and establish the school transportation fee offset account.
And that, I think our question was, what's the difference between an offset account and any other type of account?
Yep, and then I'm going to ask
Revolving.
my friend, the town accountant, to come back up.
Between that and a revolving account, right?
Right, right.
You know, there's actually not a lot of difference. What this does is it dedicates the revenue that is collected from the students for those transportation fees. It makes the revenue that we expect to collect in 2015 available as an offset to the transportation contract as soon as this fund is voted.
So in the same year?
In the same year, and as soon as it's voted, right on 7/1, if she wanted to charge $31,000 of one of the transportation bills to this fund, she could do that.
Right.
The only potential problems that could happen would be that if we estimated that we were going to collect the $31,000 and we collected something less than that, then whatever the difference is, whatever the shortfall is, if we're unable to take care of it in the current year budget appropriations that we have, then it would be something that we would have to raise in the next year on the recap if there were a deficit. On the flip side of that, if we generate more revenue than what we estimated, whatever revenue is left in that fund at the end of the year closes to the general fund at year end. But I can tell you, the school's been collecting the transportation fees for 2 years. FY15 will be the third year. In FY13, we collected $31,900. In FY14 to date, we've collected $31,600. And the estimate for 2015 is $31,000. The other thing is, in order to even establish this fund, you have to write to the Director of Accounts and get their approval. You have to provide them with the history on the revenues that you've received, and they have to, grant the approval for you to do that. So that being said, given the fact that we have the history of the $31,000, we have the approval from the Director of Accounts, I really don't anticipate any problems with the fund for 2015.
You already have the approval?
We already have
account?
the approval.
So the difference between this and a revolving fund is you can expend the funds before they actually arrive. As opposed to a revolving fund, they would have to come in first.
Well, not necessarily, but with many of the revolving funds, if you had a deficit at year end, you could roll that deficit forward, and you wouldn't have to raise a deficit if you had it in the fund, knowing that you were going to receive the revenue. Maybe there was just a delay in the receipt or something like that, whereas this fund, if you have a deficit on June 30th, you have to raise it or deal with it. If you have a revenue surplus, it closes.
So either way, it closes out every year?
Closes out
Which is a
every
little different
year.
from the revolving fund, which
Correct.
carries over from year to year, either
Correct.
as a deficit or a surplus.
Correct.
Karen, where did the funds come from? All students or just a subset of?
I actually got a copy of the transportation packet that Loxie sends out to the students. It's actually students in grades, I want to say it's grades 8 through 12. It's $180 a year, and I believe it caps off at $500 per family if there's more than one student in the household. So that's how that's the generation of the fees.
Irrespective of where they live in town?
Correct. If they take the bus,
Okay.
it's $180.
I move that we recommend approval for this in the amount of $31,000.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Karen, I want to thank you for
Thank
that
you.
explanation.
Thanks an
It's
awful
pretty
lot.
clear.
Very clear.
So I think
Excuse me.
both the planning board article relative to medical marijuana dispensaries and the Ag Commission article, the right to farm bylaw, you either want to hear the discussion at town meeting or no direct financial impact, I'm assuming.
Well, I think we passed over the right to farm bylaw because it was longer than we could read that
Oh,
last
that's
time.
true.
I think we just wanted to be able to read it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people feel comfortable, like either making a determination that there is no financial impact at this point, or if you still want to just wait.
Having looked at it, I don't really see any financial impact, but I really like to listen to the discussion in case there is some, so I'd rather not make a recommendation on that one.
I'm okay with that.
And that was true of the marijuana, we were going to wait until, okay.
Did I miss one?
Yeah, we
The
went
road
over it.
acceptance?
We went over it.
Oh, 25. We said last time 25 was no direct impact.
Yeah.
Is that what we said?
Yep. I thought we were talking about 28 and 29.
28 was the right to farm.
Right. So we're going to hear the presentation on Article 28, right to farm, and then decide whether there's any direct impact.
Yep.
Same for Article 29, which is the acceptance of Townway Whitetail Crossing as
So-
built road.
Typically, the Finance Committee has assumed that there's no direct financial impact, even though we're going to have to do plowing and that sort of thing.
I'd like to hear how big the road is.
Yep, that's my take.
And the Board of Selectmen will have to go through a public hearing process on that. That hasn't occurred yet.
Okay.
And again, just to go back, because I thought I want to make sure I get the minutes right, but on Article 25, is it that we're waiting for the meeting, or that we determined that there was no financial impact?
I thought we voted.
No financial
I-
impact?
Direct impact.
I have in my notes that we said no direct impact.
Okay.
I do also.
You do, yeah.
So I think what threw me off was when Carrie said that you were going to wait for the meeting, and I was like,
Oh, I was talking
I
about
pro-
28.
okay.
I had already moved past that.
I'm sorry, I'm slow.
We went to 27, and then we went back to 24 and 26, right?
Okay.
So that's the warrant? Oh, no, we have two more that are
Yeah.
on hold.
So then Article 30 is one I put forth, and this relates to the land use director, which we haven't finalized the job description or anything, but this is sort of a placeholder. There's a provision in the charter that allows for administrative reorganizations, but it requires the approval of town meeting. And I just put this in the event that as we get into the discussion about the land use director, somebody says, oh, wait a minute, that's an administrative reorganization. I don't think that it is. I mean, I think we're just going to change the job description, and we're not, I don't think it is, but in the event it is, it's there. So we will have discussion during this month at the Board of Selectmen meetings about that job description and how that role will change.
You're not planning on changing reporting structure, right? Just oversight?
Right, so coordination, not, so that, this person will be the town planner, same reporting structure there. The appointment might be interesting, because the appointment of the town planner, planning director, is town manager ratified by the planning board. So maybe there's going to be some discussion about that, because if this person also serves as the economic development director and is coordinating activities, not supervising, but coordinating the activities of conservation and building, and it might not make 100% sense to have the ratification done solely by the planning board.
Well, that's a charter definition, though, isn't it? Is it not? And we'd have to revisit the charter if we wanted to change that.
Well, I mean, the person is going to serve as the planning director,
Right.
but in addition, will be doing some other things. So I don't think the ratification process might be more than just the planning board. But we certainly would be complying with the town charter.
Can we assume, though, that the additional responsibilities that you envision in this position will be clearly spelled out in the job description and also in the future management objectives, so that that person will be evaluated heavily based on the economic developments that they contribute, the working with the reuse committee, building reuse committee? In other words, that there's going to be a real level of expectation within that job to do these things. You've had all of our support. We all see it as a good investment in the town to add the additional funds. I just want to make sure that that person, whoever that person may eventually be, is going to be driving towards those goals as well as the supervisory or whatever,
Yeah.
roles besides.
The reason we have not, I mean, the position is vacant, the planning director position is essentially vacant at this point in time. The reason that we have not moved forward with filling that is I want to make sure that everybody involved has a clear expectation of what this person is doing, what the reporting structure is, what the responsibilities are, because we had a full-time planning director. This person can't be a full-time planning director and a part-time economic development director and a part-time supervisor. So there's going to have to be a clear understanding that, this person is not just a planning director, working 36 hours a week as a planning director. Maybe this person is working 24 hours a week as a planning director and the rest of the time as an economic development director. So I want to make sure everybody understands that as we're moving forward.
Yep.
And then the last is the petition article, and this is a request to allow for the licensing of common victualers to sell beer, wine, and liquors and cordials. We talked about this last week. Right now, we only license people to sell either all alcohol or beer and wine. This is a third option. Doesn't come with additional licenses, but a third option to license the cordials as well. And I had a note that, and I'm not sure now if it was you or the Board of Selectmen that asked about fees, so we're going to look at whether or not we should be charging a higher fee for this if it's approved. So I would recommend that you hold off on recommending.
Are the fees differentiated for beer and wine versus full liquor?
Yes.
Okay.
And then actually, just to go back to what John had brought up last year, you may have been right, there might be another U in liqueur. It might have been spelled, I think there's another.
U-E-U-R-S?
It's U-E-U, I think.
I will
Strange-
check that.
Strange spelling, that's all.
I will check it.
Irrelevant.
No, I know, but it was, I just
It's
wanted to go
not,
back
we don't
to-
want
I
to be
just wanted
licensing the
double-check.
wrong thing. I mean,
Are we comfortable holding on that then?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
No.
Kerry, there's one other handout here that we have. The fiscal 14 changes in choice and charter.
oh, okay. I would. May have the town accountant come back again to go through that. You don't want to do it? No. Why?
This was just for informational purposes for you, because we were asked today by Loxi to take a look at these numbers and see where we stand. And actually, this is very good news for us compared to prior years where we've actually been looking at deficits at this point in time because of changes in enrollment for both choice and charter tuition. The choice tuition assessments and the revenues that come into district, they're looked at, I think it's probably 3 times a year. Well, they do the original assessment, which is based upon what happened in the prior year. Then they look at the enrollment on, I believe it's December 1st, and I think they look at it again April 1st, and they adjust throughout the year. Based upon the most recent information that's posted to the DESE website, it looks like our choice assessments are actually $56,000 and some change lower than what they were on the cherry sheet that we received at the beginning of the fiscal year. Our charter assessments are $24,000 lower than what was anticipated when we received the cherry sheet back in July. But at the same time, with the charter assessments, when the assessments are reduced, the reimbursements that we receive also go down a little bit because it's based upon changes from the prior years and percentages from those amounts. So that being said, the net of all of the changes with both the revenues that are coming into the district for the charter tuition reimbursements and the expenditures that are going out for charter and choice assessments, we are looking at a surplus in those lines of $65,000 for the close of 2015. And that will close at year end it'll close out to our undesignated fund balance and become part of our free cash certification for 2015 purposes as of 7/1/2014.
Okay.
And
You said close of
fund
2015, but you,
Oh,
2014.
because we're talking 15.
No, I know,
The
it's
close
tough
of
to-
2014, free cash will be certified for the close of
Perfect.
2014 and be available for appropriation, if we have any, as of 7/1/2014.
And do you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The free cash numbers now do not include this, this $65,000 surplus.
They don't, because the
Or
free
the
cash
US,
that we're
the
working with
European,
now is based on the prior year
Oh,
close.
sorry, I should, the projected UFB does not include this yet.
No, it does not.
Okay, thanks.
Did you have something, Brian?
Go ahead.
What's the basis for the fiscal 15 budget assumptions for choice and charter? Is it the original estimates, the original cherry sheet estimates for 14, or is there,
You know, I can take a look at those for you and see if I can make any sense of where the numbers are coming from, but typically, when they're putting together the estimates for 2015, they're based upon the most recent numbers that they have when they're working on the budget on the state level for 2014. So I'm not sure if those are based on what they thought was going to happen originally in 2014, or if there are some changes along the way for the changes that we're looking at here. But I can get that information for you.
Yeah,
So
they-
that you,
the direction I'm going with this is that if we use the original cherry sheet estimates for the school's budget for fiscal 15, and now we're seeing a positive variance on both charter and choice, then maybe this helps to close that gap that we have between the superintendent's recommendation and
And
town
Carrie's.
manager's recommendation. And would we know that by town meeting?
well, I don't think
I don't
those
think we can
numbers.
spend it by town meeting, because I think
It's
we'd
not
have to
gonna
wait till
change.
next year.
It's not going to change, right? Whatever assumptions we have, that's what we have.
Right, I don't think those assumptions are going to change prior to the town meeting.
This, this additional $65,000, let's say it's additional, could be spent at a fall town meeting, but we probably can't spend it in May, basically is what,
Well, no, we can't spend this money. This money's going to close out. We can't spend this money in 2014.
Right.
This is going to be an appropriation closeout that becomes part of our free cash available for appropriation in all of 2015.
2015, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's great. Any other questions for Karen on that?
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Kerry, any other budget-related information? Any other general updates? Thank you very much.
I would just like to make a comment.
Please.
As we've gone through the budget process, we've spoken to a lot of different people, and I have to say that for a town of our size, we have an awful lot of really competent, really professional, and really knowledgeable people, and thank you all for that.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, next up, we have minutes. I see Terry's been trying to get caught up here.
Busy.
What do we have, the 13th first?
Do you want, should I just withdraw the 13th?
You want to hold the 13th? We've got a typo on the 13th that I've asked Terry to correct. How about the 20th?
th or the 20th?
Well, there's the 20th and the 27th.
I missed the 20th.
I was not here on the 20th, so I can't comment on this.
I move that we recommend as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion?
Did I say that wrong?
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the 27th.
I move that we accept the minutes for March 27th as written.
I second.
Those in favor? I'm sorry, discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No, and I'm just going to go back to the 320. Did you not vote?
On the 20th?
I did not vote.
Okay, so it's 5 no and an abstention.
Yep.
Okay.
And I didn't vote on the last one.
You didn't vote on that?
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Saw the
You
video.
watched it, so, you know.
You saw the video.
I did.
If we had, you know, Skype, we could have had you here.
No, you wouldn't have wanted me.
Not even in spirit?
No. No. I tried to put it at the end of the table.
We have all these books between us.
Yes.
We still have our budget letter to get through, but do we have any committee updates?
We have not met in capital planning. We have a meeting scheduled for building reuse this coming Monday, April 7th.
I have nothing.
I have none.
Brian?
No, library meeting was several weeks ago.
Okay.
I have nothing. But can I ask a question now that we're sort of going through? Jason's, I don't remember who he's tasked with. Is that anything that any of us need to,
He's public safety
is that something
and
that?
sewer.
And
Is he
sewer, yeah.
I just didn't know if that's something that we needed to,
Actually, I'm going to reach out to Jason and find out what his status is.
Okay.
He either has to rejoin the committee or re-engage or,
that's fine. I just didn't-
Resign.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
of it as we went through it.
yeah, I've been thinking about that, too. I attended the school committee meeting last evening. The primary budget topic was the budget hearing. It's a good opportunity for me to get caught up on the budget since I missed that you've all heard that budget, so you know what they're asking for. There was also a presentation of a new enhanced lockdown procedure called ALICE, Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And they'll be looking to engage with the community in a training program to get the word out about this new procedure. And the school building committee has not met, but does meet next week. So I'll have an update from them the next time we get together. Okay. So the budget letter. I did my best to draft this based on the best available information and what discussion we've had so far. But by all means, I am looking for any input. John did send me a couple of grammatical recommendations, which I've worked in.
Okay.
John, if you want to go through those.
Well, I actually took copies, so why don't we pass out the, if you don't mind? I
That's fine.
don't want to take up too much time, but couple of just usage things, and then one or two substantials.
Okay, so some minor wording in the first two paragraphs. Those both seem to make sense to me. Actually, the first three paragraphs. I apologize for those listening in. Then on the state aid, the question was whether those totals should add up, and the answer is no, not without further information. I was just trying to highlight the two primary drivers of state aid. Chapter 70 in the amount of 345.7, and unrestricted general government aid in the amount of 46.5. I did add a sentence or a phrase that that is along with a small increase in excluded debt. I'm sorry, wrong one. That is offset by a reduction in school choice receiving tuition.
That's where the...
That's where the delta was.
Yeah, because the two that you listed were over what the
Right.
state aid, so that was a little confusing to me.
Yep, so I clarified that. The next was free cash, and the balance will partially offset the deficits, and I agree that that's appropriate. I also updated the snow and ice estimate to 209.9 based on what town manager had this evening.
Yep.
And then on the second page, John recommended separating the excluded debt from the regular debt, which I did, and I also indicated that that will not have an impact on the budget. So it impacts the tax rate, but not the budget.
Okay.
And then I don't know if you want to offer up some wordsmithing of the,
Let me pass this out too, and we can decide as a committee. Oops.
Who brought on the English
A
guy?
little, oops, thanks.
John, I'm poking fun at you, but this is awesome. You did good work.
Oh. Well, thanks.
I'm just glad
But,
it's somebody else.
It's a great committee to be a part of, what can I say?
The only, as I read that whole section in terms of the town manager's recommendation that these savings should be used, I thought it was to help fund other future capital projects, whether it involved borrowing or not, which would include the pavement plan, but wasn't restricted to the pavement plan. So that, say, for example, in 5 years, when we have to borrow money to replace another fire truck, that she was looking for the total of the 1.2 million to reflect capital and debt service and the pavement management plan, all three.
Actually, no. In her narrative, she specifically called out the pavement management plan.
Okay.
In the 5-year plan, that's where she had initially discussed it, was as she takes down the debt, that those monies would then be applied towards the pavement management plan. But I do think I find there's a little bit of a source of concern there, because I think we're constantly having other investments presented to us. And I'm not saying they're bad investments, but it's a fire truck this year. It could be the lane project next year. It could be something else. I worry that perhaps the reduction in debt spending that she portrayed in the 5-year plan cannot be realized, as there's other things that are coming in behind it that are filling that void. On the flip side, when we make decisions like we made tonight to add supplemental monies to the pavement plan, we're accomplishing the same thing, but we're doing it more quickly, and we're not going to be as reliant on bringing down debt, which may never come down.
Well, but the text says we expect this to happen, not that it actually will happen. And if it does happen, first of all, we have a horizon. This is a message from the committee to the town for the next year. And so the horizon is fairly short. And so I think we can, I think we can narrow the focus, as the original draft was anyway, to pavement management.
I like the focus that it's going towards that. I do like, I'm just a little bit, color me skeptical on how much monies are going to be freed up when we have constant other potential things to invest in moving forward.
Yeah.
That's my only concern.
I share your concern in general, and that's the reason why we built the policy to allow some measure of borrowing, but to put a cap on it. But if you look at the debt service schedule, in 2023, 2024,
Right.
we are going to see a significant retirement of debt.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can afford to put the roads off for 9 or 10 more years.
Agreed.
But it does get better out further in time.
Okay.
So I guess there's two elements to this. One is the simplification of the first sentence, which I agree with. And then the second would be, do we, in fact, concur with the town manager's recommendation that these savings should be used to help fund the pavement plan?
Should those savings be realized? Yes.
Okay, how about we say that?
Well, I think it's probably fine the way that it's
I
worded,
think it's
that
fine
these
the way it
savings
is.
should be used. So if there are savings, this is how they should be used. I think
Okay.
that's,
And if there aren't,
then-
we can't use them.
That
Pretty
works?
automatic.
But last year, we found, what, 100,000+ to go into the pavement management plan.
Yep.
Tonight, we added another 113,000 to it. And if year after year, 100 here, 100 there, it's not long before you're into that 800,000 once you add the Chapter 90 funds to it. So if we can just chip away at it every year, finding any funds that are available, it does at least take us closer to where we need to be.
Yep, agreed. Okay, so I want to go back to the areas that I highlighted in yellow to make sure that we're in agreement. So the first is free cash, and we recommend transferring $74,729 to the stabilization account, which we in fact voted on this evening.
Yep.
So
Right.
that's good.
Yep.
Monty Tech assessment, we support town manager's recommendation to pay the one-time charge in fiscal 14, effectively reducing the fiscal 15 appropriation by the same amount. Now, it remains to be seen whether that will actually happen, but I think we did agree to support that, that recommendation. So we're good with that? We just talked about the non-excluded debt. Unclassified, the health insurance premiums. We need to be careful not to expect this trend to continue. Committing these funds to other recurring expenses could lead to future shortfalls. We okay with that?
Absolutely, yes.
Next paragraph, Capital Planning Committee has prioritized 23 items. Cash impact is 689.2 with financing proposed for the new fire truck. We support this recommendation. And that, in fact, was our vote this evening.
Yep.
Open space, we recommend approving this request contingent on obtaining a grant from the state. That was the Lane property. Actually, we went so far as to appropriate the $2,500. So we recommend appropriating $2,500.
Right. Contingent upon. Right?
Yep. But just to be clear that we're recommending the appropriation.
Correct.
Police chief,
Could we go back to pavement management,
course.
Mark, if we could?
Yep.
Because we have modified that 128 tonight, correct?
Yep.
So that takes it to what, 141? Or 241?
So we added 113,
Probably 242 when we get to the,
242 approximately?
call it 242.
we can double check that figure, but
Should we go so far as to say, where did I talk about the surplus? Oh, in the last next to last paragraph, so I'll have to adjust the next to last paragraph.
right.
Could I suggest one other thing on the glass half full side of things? There's no reference in here to Chapter 90 funding. So it makes it look like we only have 128,000 and we need 800,000. Last year's Chapter 90 funding was $420,000. While we don't know the exact amount, I think we should put something in there so that we don't send the message that we have a gap, but we don't have a massive gap, is I guess what I'm saying. And if we could just do some sort of reference to that, I've got that document I can provide to you with the exact amount for fiscal 14.
Yep.
But if we could reference that, then suddenly we're in the $650,000 range.
Well, actually, let me clarify. If I'm not mistaken, the 800,000 was over and above whatever we get from Chapter 90.
Okay.
But if Chapter 90 is a bit of an unknown, and if we have wide swings in it, maybe we just state it as, I think you're right, we have to reference the Chapter 90.
Right. And even if we give previous year's amount, while this year's hasn't been determined, however, last year we received $422,000 in Chapter 90 funds.
How about note that,
I'll give you this.
how about something to the effect of, we also expect some state aid from Chapter 90. Although we don't know how much.
The specific, yeah.
We did get 422.1 in fiscal 14.
Right.
So the pavement plan remains severely underfunded. 242 is included toward a goal of 800. Note, we also expect some state aid from Chapter 90, although we don't yet know how much. It was 422.1 in fiscal 14. And then maybe say something different about the surplus.
Yeah.
Actually, it's no longer a surplus, right?
Right.
Because it's all been appropriated.
Correct.
Exactly.
So I'll
Take it right out.
take it right out. Police chief has requested 3 officers. We agree with the town manager's recommendation to first seek other means of funding additional officers, such as regional lockup, local traffic fines, and towing fees.
Should we say anything about the long-term expectation that we will indeed be putting additional officers in place? We acknowledge the need.
I was thinking that.
Yeah.
Other than that, I thought it was fine.
About, we acknowledge the need for,
Additional officers or different additional personnel.
police chief has requested 3 full-time officers at a benefit, plus benefits at a cost of blah, blah, blah. We acknowledge the need for additional police officers. We agree with the town manager's recommendation to first seek other means of additional funding.
That's good.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Town manager has requested upgrading land use director by $12,500 to attract the right candidate. We agree with town manager's plan to offset this with reduced legal services.
It's already been moved.
That's all in the
It's-
budget now.
That's all in the budget now, so
Could we strike that, or
Well,
do
we
we
can
say
still
that?
agree with
Oh, we
And have voted
incorporated
to
it?
include that in the budget.
Or we agree with the town managers.
we agree with the town manager and have reappropriated
Yep.
Appropriated.
and have appropriated accordingly.
Funding within the budget?
Okay. DPW director recommending a street sweeper. We agree more information is needed before we commit to a purchase of this magnitude.
Personally, I'd like to take out the phrase "we agree,"
And
only
simply,
because "we agree" typically says, you know, we agree with some recommendation ahead of time. It might be misread as "we agree that we should."
We believe
Purchase
more
the
information
units.
is
I
needed.
just-
How about we believe more information
More
is needed?
information.
Fine.
Yeah.
Just, and I was uncomfortable with the "we agree" only because it could be misread if
Why-
somebody's
Can we
skimming.
just say we support the capital planning committee's recommendation to,
we support the capital planning committee's recommendation to study outsourcing as a possible alternative. Does that work?
It's not just
We could do-
outsourcing, though.
Or an eventual
Replacement.
approval.
Is a
I mean-
is a possible
How
alternative,
about-
semicolon, more information is needed.
if we just
before
said
you
Yeah.
do a
More
purchase.
information is needed, we believe more information is
where I
needed,
was.
and just left it at that?
Yes.
That's what I did.
More information is needed.
Stop, "we agree."
Good wordsmith.
And then, to summarize, the town manager, department heads, and finance team have assembled a budget that funds all contractual obligations and maintains service levels. It requires no, just strike that sentence on the surplus. It requires no draw on stabilization or free cash. Note, this is possible because of health insurance
Yep.
decreasing. Any other changes? I know I skipped over.
Should we say anything about something we can't really expect to get every year? Or did we already say that somewhere else?
I think he did say
We
that.
had, we
That-
had done
that was the-
non-recurring.
Up above.
That was the implication of the health costs, health insurance costs?
As long as we've said it someplace.
Yeah.
You know, you say it, and then you say what you're going to say, you say it, and you
Yeah,
say
say it
what
again.
you said.
Yeah. I think I did say it twice.
did.
I may need to say it 3 times.
Because it
I
wasn't
didn't
clear to
pick
me.
up, yeah. Can we make the print bigger?
Well, John
Well, that
made it
was-
smaller.
Yeah, I made it smaller
It
because
was a little bigger in my draft.
It was a lot bigger than
Yeah.
this draft.
Oh, yeah, you can actually read
I should have distributed magnifying glasses.
Actually, I have to confess, last year I used 11-point type. I had to reduce it to 10-point type to fit it on 1 page, 2 sides.
Well, we took out a sentence, so maybe we'll...
I think we're okay. I think with the edits, we're okay in terms of the length.
And I just want to say again that I thank you for doing all that. That's
Yeah, it's a great
it's an awesome
And-
summary.
summary.
Thanks to John, too. He
Yeah.
did a good job here. Any further edits on this? I will revise it and get it to the committee tomorrow so that I can get it to town manager on Monday. So if you have any further feedback, get it to me over the weekend.
Okay.
I think we go to press after the selectmen's meeting. Jamie, do you know? I think
Yes.
she was hoping to have one more meeting with the select board and then go to press
Wednesday, I think.
Wednesday, so. Okay, thanks for that. We talked last time about skipping our meeting next week. We moved it up to this week in effect. So it'll be 3 weeks before we meet again on April 24th, unless there's anything else that comes up between now and then. That meeting will be our last meeting before town meeting, unless we choose to meet. Sometimes we meet at 8:30 a.m. on the morning of town meeting, if there's anything that we think we have to review at that time.
So do we have anything on the agenda for the 24th that you know of? Because I would,
She said she was going to be bringing changes.
She's got the transfers, the fiscal 14
Yep.
transfers that we need to approve.
quick, but okay.
And I was hoping that we could finish off our fiscal policy
That would be my
draft.
recommendation.
Yep.
I'd really like to get them wrapped up.
Yeah, I
agree with
will,
that.
if you, I've put together a list of, for want of a better word right now, it's late, the preamble, just an introductory paragraph. I will actually put some text to that. And I will come with the just fine tuning of the final draft that we've got. In fact, I'll circulate that before, to
Please.
you all before we get here. Okay?
We had talked about capital planning, attending a portion of that. Would it be advisable for me to just invite the members of the capital planning committee to attend that meeting so that if they're there, if they can make it, I know Jamie and I will be there, I believe, but we'll invite the other members as well, and then we can review the policy
We,
for capital at the same time?
yeah, we do owe them a review.
Okay.
We have a couple of other reviews that town manager can help facilitate, but if you guys could help facilitate the capital planning committee review, that'd be great.
I'll work with Marjorie Boggio
Yeah.
to get an invitation out to everybody to attend that meeting.
Okay?
Should we ask them for a time frame? Should just be there at 7 when we convene?
We can put it at the top of the agenda.
Okay.
I don't think Kerry will mind if
7:15, so we get through whatever business we have to get through, or
we can do that. Why don't we do that?
they have a specific time.
I don't know how many more people will come, but I'll at least invite them.
Okay?
And then if somebody else could bring a pen that night, I won't be here. So.
You want to be doing a lot of talking?
I'll be in Camden, Maine.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else for this evening?
Nothing.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move. We adjourn.
I second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and good night.